For your N64, it's Command and Conquer. A global war is set between the biggest terrorist group the world has ever known, the Brother of Nod. And to defend democracy, the Global Defense Initiative is armed and ready. You must decide which side you will be on in this 3D real-time strategy game. Capture the sensation of war with Command and Conquer for your N64.
Alright folks, welcome back to the channel. This week's video I'm taking a look at Command & Conquer, the PC version versus the N64. Let's do this. Okay, so folks, let's set some ground rules here first. What is the actual comparison I'm doing today? Well, I'm actually using the Command & Conquer Remaster Collection on PC. However, I'm going to tune that so that it's closest as possible to the original PC release versus the N64 version, which in fact was the very first 3D Command & Conquer game, believe it or not, because Command & Conquer before that was always 2D. So if you think about it, back then when this game launched, it was actually graphically superior to that of any PC or PS1 release at the time. The N64 version was also compatible with the expansion pack on the N64, and it allowed you to change the resolution. So you could change the battlefield resolution from medium to high. Now I'll go into a little bit more detail on that later on. For the purpose of the start of this video, I'll be playing it in high resolution, and then midway I'll switch to medium resolution just to show the difference. So I'm going to do the campaign mission 5 here on both the PC and 64, and let's compare both and how the level is structured, how the controls work, and any explicit differences between mission start and mission end on both versions. So as you can see here from the kind of overlap side-by-side comparison, very similar structures to that of the PC. You have the selectable map, you have that little rotation of the Earth animation that happens at the start, and then again, game gives you the choice to pick which mission you want. And all that plays out really familiar to that of the PC and the N64 version. No major changes there. However, when you start the missions, there is a major difference in the introduction sequences themselves.
Commander, Carter here. It's absolutely essential that you get this infantry commando across the making sure to avoid obstacles. Just enough time to plant. Commander, Carter here. It's absolutely essential that you get this infantry commando across the making sure to avoid obstacles.
So as you can clearly see, the N64, its cart basically cannot handle an actual FMV sequence in this case due to the memory limitations of the cart itself. So they had to opt to add really low quality audio and kind of still images versus the full FMV sequences of the PC version. Plus the PC release also had kind of additional kind of animated FMV sequences after the actual initial mission briefings. But to be honest with you, again, it's understandable given the limitations of the cart. So let's do a side-by-side of Mission 5 as I mentioned previously. And I also stated that I wanted this to be as close as possible to the original. So in the PC remastered version, there's actually 2 video modes. So it has a kind of high-res mode and it looks like redrawn graphics. It's absolutely gorgeous. But again, for the comparison video here specifically, we're going to make the game look as close as possible to the original PC release versus the N64 version. So as I mentioned, the N64 version is actually the very first 3D Command & Conquer game, and it's definitely visually appealing. It's got a darker tone to its colours. It has heavier contrast, I found, overall compared to the PC version. It also looks to have 3D remodelling done on its explosions and its special effects. So when you actually go to blow up an enemy vehicle, as one example, there's an actual explosion effect that looks to be 3D and not just a 2D sprite like the original game. So let's talk about audio next, and to be honest with you, yes, the audio in general on the N64 seems to be in a lower bitrate. So the audio quality is much lower than it is to the PC release, as you can hear here.
No! Moving out! No! Moving out!
So if we're looking at the overall graphical fidelity of the PC version versus the N64 version. For me personally, I still like the retro style of the original release. There's just something about it that's just still so appealing to me. It's probably nostalgia speaking to me somewhat. That's not to take away from the effort that the N64 version has made. It plays to its strengths, although there's one thing about this high res mode versus the medium res mode. I find the frame rate on the N64 version when you actually use the expansion pack is actually worse than it is when you set it to medium resolution. And to be honest with you, the medium versus high res, I found little to no major difference beyond maybe slight sharpening of the textures. It's minimal change at best, and to be honest, I prefer performance over gaining a couple of extra pixels that really don't make all that much difference in the end. Okay, so let's just move on now to the controls. Probably the most important aspect on the N64 is how does this RTS game control? If I'm comparing from a recent video I've done from StarCraft 64 to straight away, StarCraft 64 controls better than CNC 64. I actually had to use my retro 8-bit controller in order to make the cursor movement smooth, whereas I did not have this problem with StarCraft 64 on the actual original N64 controller. Now I had to adjust also the cursor speed to medium. It was set to low at first and I found it very sluggish, so I needed to turn it up to medium to get some form of decent response. So to explain the control scheme, you use the cursor, as I mentioned, to move around, and in order to drag, select your units. To move your units, then you tap the A button in the given location, whether it's on the Fog of War or it's in the map that's already been revealed. Next, in order to bring up the build menu, you hit the Z button, and that brings up the build menu, so you can build your units and you can build your structures, etc. Works quite well. You tap the button, it'll appear from the left, tap the button again, it'll disappear to the right. Then in order to select commands, you tap the R button and it'll scroll through commands like repair, sell. You can rotate through those by using either of those shoulder buttons essentially on the N64, and that again works quite well. It works quite well overall, again with those couple of caveats. Honestly, if I was to compare it again, I think the comparison point really for an RTS game on the N64 is always going to be StarCraft 64 for me now that I've experienced it. I just think it does everything slightly better than what CNC 64 has done. Just to quickly skip back to PC versus N64 fidelity, there's a nice little ending cutscene here whenever you beat a mission. It's done in 3D. That's N64 exclusive, that isn't on the PC. And the actual end and score screens are very much similar to what they are in the PC in the end. But there's just to call out any little differences I noted, there's that little ending sequence which isn't present in the original PC version. But when you actually look at the end screens or the score screens, they're pretty much laid out the exact same way as they are on the PC. Okay, so let's get to an overall conclusion. How do I feel about the N64 version in comparison to the PC version? PC version is just king in all aspects, to be honest with you. I just prefer the style. I'm not too fond of the 3D style of CNC, in all honesty. It's a commendable effort. It's a commendable effort on the N64. I do think StarCraft 64 done it better. It is playable, and if you want to kind of kick back on the couch and play a strategy game on the console, this is a good option, although some might also argue that the PS1 version of Command & Conquer might actually be a better fit for you. I've played that also, and I didn't find that as sluggish as this. I think it's the controller limitation for the N64 and how they handle the movement of the cursor I struggled with. And again, StarCraft 64 just did that so much better. I just found the movement so much more fluid. So yeah, it's a good effort. Not the greatest way to play this game, in all honesty. I know people consider that, oh, comparing it to the PC, it's a bit mad because you're using mouse and keyboard controls. Yes, I take that point. But if there is certain RTS games that play really well on console, and this unfortunately probably isn't one of them. Anyway guys, let me know what you think in the chat. Have you played this? Have you played any of the console versions? Share your comments down below. If you're new to the channel, please consider supporting by liking and subscribing. It really helps me. And I'll see you in the next video guys. Hope everyone enjoyed this. Thanks for watching.
Space!